From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good morning. I'm Gail Shirazi of the Israel Judaica section of the Asian and Middle East Division in Library Services. Welcome to today's program, There Was Once, a film talk by Gabor Kalman, co-sponsored by the Packard Campus for Audiovisual Conservation and the Hebrew Language Table here at the Library of Congress, in cooperation with the Washington Jewish Film Festival. It's especially appropriate to be doing this program today, December 10th, UN Human Rights Day. The film deals with both the goodness and the evil of mankind in the past and the present. This program has been a truly collaborative program. I would like to thank Anna Bayer, an unbelievable organizer, Juliet Birch of the DCJCC, Susan Barocas, formerly of the Washington Jewish Film Festival, Galina Tavarovsky, Mike Mashan, and our Public Affairs Office here at the Library of Congress, and of course, Gabor Kalman. Gabor, an award-winning documentary filmmaker, is currently adjunct professor at Occidental College and at the Arts Center's College of Design in Pasadena, California, and formerly of the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts. A founding member of the International Documentary Association, he served on its board for 9 years. He created the prestigious David L. Walper Student Documentary Achievements Awards. As a senior Fulbright scholar, he taught at the Academy of Theater and Film and Arts in Budapest, and recently as a senior Fulbright specialist. Gabor was born in Hungary. While in college, he joined his country's uprising against the communist regime and immigrated to the United States as a university student in 1956. He received his BA in physiology from the University of California in Berkeley and an MA in communication, film, and television from Stanford University. The presentation will start with clips, a talk, and then Q&A. I want to thank Gabor and all those who helped with the program.
Kedves Gábor, Dr. Magónétó Gyöngyi vagyok.
Dear Gabor, I am Mrs. Dr. Mago, Gyöngyi Tóth. I teach history and Hungarian language in a middle school in Kalocsa. While doing research, I found your name, Fischl Gabor, on a list known as the Jaros list, compiled on April 8, 1944, of the Jewish community in Kalocsa. I also found the names of Fischl Géza and Mrs. Fischl Géza. Unfortunately, I am very aware that today, Kalocsa is not conscious of its Jewish citizens that once lived here. Young people don't even know that Jews ever lived here.
Dear Gyöngyi, I was very touched by your letter. Indeed, it is I and my parents you found on the death list. I'd be very happy to answer your questions and help your work any way I can. We could do this by email, or perhaps we could meet in person when I come to Budapest in May as a Fulbright professor to teach at the university. I should also tell you that I'm a documentary filmmaker and live in Los Angeles.
Dear Gabor, naturally, I'd like to meet you in person next time you are visiting Hungary. But until then, I'd bombard you with many questions, if you allow me. Where was the Kalman lumberyard? I have more such questions. You may not even be able to get rid of me. Looking forward to your response. Magoni Gyöngyi.
Zsidót soha nem is láttam, életemben se. Tehát én még azt mondhatom, hogy 8 évvel ezelőtt se láttam én zsidót. Lehet, hogy láttam, csak nem tudtam, hogy az. Mindig nagyon érdekelt a helytörténet. Tehát amikor elérkezett 2004-ben az idő, hogy szakdolgozatot írok a Szegedi Egyetemen, akkor az számomra teljesen egyértelmű volt, hogy én helytörténetet fogok írni. Az ötlet, hogy hát itt volt egy kalocsai zsidóság. Hát biztos volt. Nem tudom, soha sehol beszélgetések során ez föl nem merült, ez nem téma Kalocsán. A mai óra témája az a kalocsai zsidóság lesz. Ma nem élnek itt zsidók, de valaha éltek.
Yes, Kalocsa had a very vibrant and very lively, interesting Jewish community. It composed almost 6% of the total population. The population at that time was about 12,000. And today there's a plaque on the former synagogue's wall saying that out of the 511 Jews, 393 perished. This is, can you hear me? This is not an accurate count, and I don't know where they got it. The statistics I got later is at a far larger number, but nevertheless, about 2/3 of the Jews of Kalocsa perished during the Holocaust. But the Jewish community was a very interesting one. It wasn't a very religious community. As someone in the film says that only the rabbi was very religious. There were some more observant families, and of course we went to the synagogue on holidays, but it was a very integrated community. Most of the Jews were merchants, some doctors, and they were not even not only a ghetto, but not even a Jewish quarter in town. They lived all over the place, and really were part of the city's cultural life and social life as well. So it differed somewhat from many other Hungarian cities of the same size. The city was, it still is, known for three things: the colorful embroidery that you saw, and a little bit of that, painting and embroidery; paprika, which is very well known in Hungary, of course in great competition with the largest city, Szeged, but ask anyone from Kalocsa and they tell you that's the best. I think it is. And the bishopry, that actually the small town which
Kalocsa still is now. The population hasn't grown that much in all those years. It's 18,000, but became a city because it was the seat of the archbishop. And the archbishop attracted more educational and more, the Jesuit order came to Kalocsa and they set up one of the best schools in the country. In fact, many of the Jewish kids who grew up in Kalocsa and went to the Jewish elementary school ended up going to the Jesuit gymnasium to get a really good and famous education. Today, as György said, there are no Jews living in Kalocsa. The Jesuits are there, but there are no Jews in their classes either. And that was a long time ago. But in 2008, when I went there and started shooting the film, something else was happening.
Augusztus eleje óta, amióta bejelentették a Magyar Gárda megalakulását, az Egyesület állandó témája a hazai és a nemzetközi sajtónak.
Egy 1000 éves nemzet vár számvetést a hatalmat birtokoltól. Az nem lehet, hogy annyi szép hiába a vér. Az új választással visszakaphatjuk a reményt arra, hogy holnap nem lesz rosszabb, hanem jobb lesz, de még nem végeztünk. Nem állunk meg célúton, a hídon végig kell mennünk, hogy a célunkat elérjük.
Az antiszemitizmus úgy gondolom, hogy országosan ma létező dolog Magyarországon. Sajtóban megjelenik, honlapokon megjelenik, fogékony réteg van erre. Azt hiszem mindig is volt, most ez egy kicsikét felszabadult. Itt tudom, hogy biztosan Kalocsán is jelen van, mert ez sem egy más város, mint a többi. Tehát biztos, hogy jelen van. Én személyesen nem találkozom vele. Hol erősebben, hol gyengébben, ez mindig jelen volt, ez a dolog.
Azt mondtuk egy este karácsony táján, hogy most pedig elmegyünk, és be fogjuk lőni csúzlival egy pár zsidó háznak az ablakát. Tehát, és ez volt a mögöttünk, hogy igen, mert annak idején, ahogy az előbb említettem, a zsidók nem fogadták be Jézust, ugyanis minden esetre szóval belőttük, aztán úgy volt, hogy aztán el is kaptak bennünket természetesen a rendőrök, aztán a tárgyalás lett. Hogyha én most érett fejjel visszagondolok, szóval egy őrültség volt, hogy kisgyerekeket, 12-13 gyerekeket tudtak így manipulálni. Jól lehet, egészen más volt a milliónk, amiben fölnőttünk, mert mondom, hát konkrét emberek ellen soha nem jártunk el. De ott, mivel egy ilyen anonim lehetőség volt, akkor az ember antiszemita volt.
Kicsit arra kérlek téged, hogy mesélj nekem a családodról.
If you're confused that I have two names, I was born as Gabor Fischl. My father, who married into my mother's family's big lumber and construction business, changed his name because he was running the business and everybody called him Mr. Kalman anyway. And so then I became Kalman. The lumber yard was really one of the largest lumber yards in the area. In Kalocsa, it was a small town, but surrounded by many villages. So it was very popular and very well-known entity there. And I, as an only child in the 30s, had a wonderful, wonderful, happy childhood with extended family, aunts, uncles, lots of cousins. Kalocsa is very near the Danube, and I remember as kids we used to bicycle to the Danube for a swim. And the winter time has a horse-drawn sleigh taking us to the seeing the ice floats on the Danube. Summertimes went vacationing on Lake Balaton, and a lot of parties and cultural events and friends, and was nothing but the wonderful childhood memories. Until about 1943, something dramatic happened and things start to develop rather unpleasantly. It was March 15th, the great Hungarian holiday, and I was 8 years old and was going to my school to celebrate the holiday. I was wearing my best Sunday suit, a navy blue suit with shorts, of course, and wearing the kokarda, which is the Hungarian national emblems that people put on their lapels for that day. And suddenly I was walking the main street, and suddenly out of an alley, 3 kids, taller, bigger, and older than I, jumped on me and started to beat me up, saying, "You filthy Jews, you're not Hungarian, go to Palestine." With bloodied knees and torn shirts, I went crying home to my bewildered parents, and my first question was, what is Palestine? From then on, shortly after, the so-called Jaros list was formed. Jaros was the interior minister of Hungary, and he very meticulously put together a list of all the Jews who should be gotten rid of. And Gyöngyi, the teacher you met briefly, subject of the film, bless her heart, found the Kalocsa section of the Jaros list with my name on it as a 9-year-old boy. And I actually have it here too. Shortly after that, the then mayor of Kalocsa ordered the Jews to go to the ghetto, to form a ghetto. And again, thanks to Gyöngyi's diligent research, I have a copy of that document, and I would like to read some of it as a more authentic than my memories. It's a long 2-page document describing how to form the ghetto, and interestingly enough, our home became part of the ghetto. And I'm just reading a couple of assorted paragraphs here. Every individual Jew may take 4 changes of underwear and clothing, bed, bedding, cooking utensils, and heating fuel, food for 3-4 weeks, personal and cleaning utensils, and other objects necessary for everyday living. They cannot take more than 3,000 tengers in cash, valuables, jewelry, luxury items, and furnishings for comfort. Then goes on in great detail, saying, Jews to make an inventory in 4 copies of all belongings left behind and turn this along with their keys to the authorities. I also warn that all valuables should be deposited with the city treasury before the move. Discovery of hidden valuables or jewelry will result in severe internment. For the purpose of making the inventories, I make 2 typewriters available. And finally, I warn the inhabitants of the city to cut all contacts with the Jews in the ghetto immediately under severe penalty and the strictest internment. And then what happened?
És hát amíg az emlékezetes kiköltöztetés a gettóba, onnan vonultattak bennünket elég késő este. A pályaudvarra volt valaki, azt hiszem egy rendőr, aki azt mondta anyámnak, hogy ő engem elbújtat,
Igen.
de anyám nem engedett. Én sötétre emlékszem, és ugye arra, hogy a vonuló csapatot mindkét oldalon a járda szélén figyelték a kalocsai lakosok.
Mit értett meg ebből egy 6 éves kislány? Hogy ők most hova mennek?
Semmit.
Mi történik?
Szerintem semmit.
Megyek az anyuval. Valahova megyünk. Mit mondott neked? Hova megyünk? Emlékszel?
Nem mondott
Kérdezted?
semmit.
Bocsáss meg.
Láttuk, hogy mennek, és akkor gyorsan odarohantunk az ablakhoz. Hát mindenki, hát a lányok is, én is, édesanyám is, mindenki odarohant, és akkor pont akkor értek oda az ablakhoz a Marikáék. Edénybe vizet kiadtam nekik, és akkor hát az a Tanács Béla nevezetű szakács, vagyis hentes, odaszólt, már pedig ne adja ki nekik a vizet, már pedig kiadom a vizet, és édesanyám is közbeszólt, és akkor hát kiadtam a vizet, és de hát ugye nem állhattak meg, mert menni kellett nekik tovább. Úgyhogy beszélni nem tudtam velük, csak a vizet adtam ki nekik.
I thought some of them felt sorry for us. Some of them I thought they were almost crying. I watched them. But some were happy seeing us finally getting rid of us.
Kertész Tomi visszaemlékezése az utolsó napra, június 18-ára. Az a címe, hogy egy öltöny az útra, és leírja, hogy az édesanyja és a nagymamája egy lópokrocból készítettek neki öltönyt. Egy részletet olvasnék belőle. Cirka 7:30 volt, mikor a gettó körülbelül 500 lakosa kiállt az utcára. Csendőrök 8-asával állították össze a sorokat. Pontosan 8 órakor a csendőrkapitány parancsa elhangzott, és a menet elindult. A késő tavaszi nap hőségét egyre jobban lehetett érezni. Én kezdtem nagyon izzadni lópokroc ruhámba. Arcomon az izzadság gyöngyei megkeveredtek a Tomori utca porával.
The street was lined with people, gawking at the once-in-a-lifetime spectacle. There was total silence. Our town was not large. It had a population of about 12,000 at the time, so 600 plus people marching represented a significant part of the town.
Out of the not so many, but a few survivors I interviewed for the film, whether they were adults or children at the time, each one of them took a lot of time to explain that that short march from the ghetto to the railroad station was one of the most bewildering, most humiliating, and most horrible experiences, even compared to later camp experiences. I wasn't part of it. I was lucky to escape just before that. But their description, and I regret that I couldn't include all of them in the film, that suddenly your neighbors, your employees, your employers, your friends, your colleagues, your classmates are lining up in the street, watching you literally herded in line to the railroad station, carrying some belongings, not knowing where you're going. And indeed, some of them were shouting insulting remarks. And I could make a separate film just from those interviews. And I particularly relate to that too, because I was spared that particular incident. From the railroad station, they were all taken to a neighboring city, Szeged, with the better paprika. And that was sort of a collection point. So many Jews from neighboring smaller towns were all collected in Szeged. And then the Kalocsa Jews were put into 3 cattle cars, about 80 or 90 per car. And something really interesting happened there. The first cattle car went to Auschwitz straight. The third car went to Auschwitz straight. The second car, for reasons nobody knows even today, witnesses or scholars, went to Austria for a labor camp. The reason that the origin of this is so hazy, there was one theory was that the Germans needed labor, but the second cattle car had just the same aging people and children, so that doesn't make much sense. One theory was that it was a mistake, but nobody could track down anyone who was involved with that. Either they left Hungary or they died or they just wouldn't come out of hiding in the last 70 years. So we don't know. The third theory, which really doesn't hold much water, but somehow that's the most quoted one, there's some privileged Jews paid a lot of money to be on that, which is not true because 2 of the wealthiest Jewish families in Kalocsa who actually were converts, they converted to Christianity generations before, but nevertheless they were taken and they were shipped to Auschwitz. So if anybody who could have bought anything, it was them. So anyway, hardly anyone came back from cattle car number 1 or 3. So most of the people who survived and most of the people who I interviewed were in Austria in a labor camp. But not all of them. That's why I wasn't even sure, or Dönyi or anyone, on the exact statistics. There's one statistics on the synagogue's wall and others I found, because many of the younger men were already drafted into the army and taken as forced laborers. And as we know today that immediately after the war there was a saying, oh, you escaped the camps, you were in the army. Forced labor experience in the Hungarian army was very equal to anything in Auschwitz or anywhere else. Many of those laborers were really laborers. They were not soldiers. They were not bearing arms. But the Hungarians used them for any forced labor, but also enormous amount of cruelty. And many of them were just executed or died of starvation. When the younger men were taken earlier than the ghettoization, my father wasn't called in because he already was beyond that age. Nevertheless, things tightened. Just as the ghetto was being formed, there were trucks going around with German and the Hungarian Nazis collecting Jewish men who still could do some labor. And my father was just on his way home when an SS soldier with a Hungarian policeman stopped him and asked for documentation. And there was a truck already standing there, and one of my uncles were on it, so it was very obvious what was happening. And my father very quietly reached in his pocket and pulled out a document and gave it to the SS, saying that, sorry, I cannot go with you. I just got summoned to Budapest for a national security matter. And he was a very well-dressed businessman still at the time, and the SS didn't do anything, got the paper and give it to the local policeman. Policeman looked at it and he just nodded, and my father came home, took the first train and escaped to Budapest. The interesting thing about the story that the paper was the laundry list he just from the cleaners. And we tried to find the Hungarian policeman after the war, but we could never locate him. And my mother and I escaped some other ways, but I'm afraid you have to see the film to find that out.
In 1942, I went to labor camp. I was 21 at that time. And from there by ship, they sent us to Bor, Yugoslavia. The famous road back to Hungary, year and a half later, 1943, only 1,500 arrived. The rest, about 2,100 people, were killed. And from there to Germany to concentration camp. By the way, we were almost happy that we get rid of the Hungarian soldiers and the German SS took us over. I had a pneumonia, and one morning when they picked up the dead, the people said, well, he's almost dead, why don't you take them? And I could say, no, I am still alive. So they took me, and suddenly I felt that they threw me in the pile of dead people. And I knew that in an hour or two they will take us to the crematorium to burn us. But perhaps the will to live gave me enough strength that I climbed through the window and went back to the barrack. And I was liberated by the American Army on May 1st, 1945. I was 85 pounds at that time.
Hogy ezekre a dolgokra, ezekre emlékezni kell. És el kell mondani, úgy, ahogy én nektek, úgy el kell mondani nektek is, hogy nem mese, amiről itt beszélnek. Erre ma még vannak élő tanúk. Ha ők nem lesznek, akkor ki fogja ezt elmondani? Nekünk kell továbbadni. Azért, hogy ilyen soha többé ne történjen meg.
Gyöngyi Mago is an incredible individual. Every single stage of her research of this extinct Jewish community, she shared it with her different classes. She involved her students in the research. She showed pictures. She took them to the libraries. And then she herself went to participate in the March of Living in Auschwitz. And then when the opportunity came for her with a group of Hungarian teachers to go to Israel, she went to Israel. And the students were part of her research. And these were mostly not only local high school students or pre-high school students, the system is slightly different there, but still kids from the neighboring villages, just like in my time. Not every village had schools, and they had to come in those days by horse-drawn buggies, but now by cars or bicycles. So these were kids who knew nothing or very little about the Holocaust. And through this single individual, not only learned about this horrible period of time, but she never missed an opportunity to speak out against prejudice and teach tolerance. And actually, that's what got me and the film. Her original goal was to write a dissertation, and then she got so involved she decided to make it into a book. And that was about the time we met. And then she also decided that it would be nice to have a memorial for this extinct community or non-existent community. And she went to see the local archbishop, several archbishops later from the early days, and asked him what he would think that if she would track down some survivors and have a memorial. And the archbishop's response was slightly guarded, but he said something like that would be okay. And he said, I don't think anybody would oppose to something like this. So she turned around and went to see the mayor, who was extremely supportive. And then she, little by little, started to track down even more survivors. Unfortunately, there are not that many. In this country, Canada, Israel, some in South America, I think only one or two living still in Hungary, and started inviting them to this memorial, which she organized to the 65th anniversary of evacuating the ghetto in Kalocsa.
Kalocsa. Köszönöm szépen. Nagyon örülök, hogy én is.
Gyöngyű a fiam.
Hi, Eleonora.
Felfogtam.
I verify every
Itt a Juliska nénő.
Michelle.
Hi. When was the last time we saw each other?
60-some years ago.
How many years ago?
65? 65. More.
And we were benchmates in elementary school.
Yeah.
You sitting next to me. This is Yutka's daughter.
I am the eldest.
Audrey.
I can
and
see.
I look like
Yutka's son, Peter.
Pleased
to meet you. And
Yutka was my classmate.
Kalocsán szerintem, meg így egész Magyarországon ez a 17-18 éves korosztály, ha megkérdezik, nem igazán tud beszélni például a kalocsai gettóról. Szerintem ilyen fontosabb dolgokat nem tudnak, hogy itt ki is halt meg hogy itt mekkora mészárlás volt valójában.
Szerintem a szüleink se tudnának erről nekünk beszélgetni, meg amit az iskolában tanulunk, azok nyers dolgok, szóval így ezáltal, hogy belefolytunk ebbe a műsorkészítésbe, így meg érzelmeket is éltünk át tényleg, meg megérezhettük. Egy picit belekóstolhattunk ebbe az egészbe.
Most délelőtt 10 óra múlt. 65 évvel ezelőtt ezekben az órákban szorongó szívvel szálltak be a vagonokba, amely azok az emberek, akiket Szegedre elszállítottak. Csomagokkal felpakolva, rémülten, megalázva várták a szomorú jövőt. Mások közülük nem várták meg a deportálást, és hamis papírokkal bujdostak. Voltak, akik munkatáborokban, például a retteget borban várták a csodát, a háború és a szenvedés végét. Arra azonban bizonyosan nem gondoltak, hogy a 20. század közepén, az úgynevezett művelt Európában előfordulhat az a szörnyűség, hogy csecsemőket, asszonyokat küldenek a gázba, és krematóriumokban égetik el őket. Pedig megtörtént. Akik tagadják ezt a tényt, forduljanak az itt ülő idős emberekhez, a túlélőkhöz, és kérdezzék meg tőlük, hogy volt-e holokauszt.
Mert az az eszme, amely elpusztította az önök testvéreit, elpusztította az önök lelkét, az újra itt van. Velünk van a 21. században Magyarországon.
Járgárda, vigyázz! Fogadás középről! Tiszteleg!
It really was a very emotional, very, very beautiful memorial. And again, I couldn't include everything here, but one of the highlights was a speech by the mayor, which at the end he says, the Jews who were helping to build our city, who were providing us with goods, and he was providing us with electricity and healed our children, are really missing from our midst today. And I was sitting there, as you could tell, and I could not believe my ears. I never thought I would live to hear something like that. But unfortunately, that was 2 years ago. The mayor is not there anymore. And just about last week, as some of you heard or read, a member of the Hungarian parliament, Martin Gyöngyös, she stood up and said that the Jews in Hungary are a threat to the security of the country, and therefore they should be registered, and suggested a list of all the Jews. Jaros lista once more, 70 years later. But then at the memorial, some other things developed as well.
Megdobtak egy amerikai nőt Kalocsán, a holokauszt megemlékezésen. Egy csavarral találták el, megsérült a tarkója, kórházba vitték. Aki dobta, azt mondta a rendőröknek, hogy zavarta a zene.
Fejét fogta, és mikor elvette a kezét, akkor láttam, hogy tiszta vér a tenyere, és utána már a haján is látszódott, hogy vérzik erősen a feje.
Féltettem. Nekem mondom, hogy nekem előérzetem volt. Én már előttem mondtam neki, hogy nem volna szabad ennyire belemerülni. Azt mondta, hogy mama, mit csinálnak velem, megvernek? Hát mondom, meg nem verhetnek, de látod, hogy a zsidók is mit csináltak.
At the very end of the film, one of the survivors says something very touching. Says, this wasn't meant to happen. We lived there for generations, and we were meant to be living and dying there. Our film celebrates the fact that one person can make a difference, and Gyöngyi Mago is truly one of those people. And I hope that her work will show the way for a more tolerant and more compassionate Hungary, which is free of prejudice and free of hatred. I would like to thank the Library of Congress and Gail Shirazi and Anna Bayer to organize this event and inviting me here. And I would like to invite you all tonight at 7 o'clock at the DC Jewish Community Center for the film. For more information, there are some cards outside. The film is not in distribution yet. We are looking for a broader distribution. But there's some information on that, and if you like to know more about it, just check the website, and we try to keep it up to date. Thank you very much.
We have time for some questions in a question and answer period. Anybody want to start with the first one? Yes.
How did you and your mother escape?
Repeat the question
Yeah.
so they can hear it.
How did I and my mother escape? It's a longish story, and I don't want to hold it out so you would go to see the film. My uncle came with false papers and a very strange story, and literally yanked us out of the ghetto by taxi. But there's far more to it, but I just don't want to get into a very long story here. But that was escape number one. Then, then we continued escaping for next year. Yes?
Was there a tipping point for the resurgence of right-wing feelings in the country today?
Repeat the question.
Was there a tipping point for right-wing feelings in the country today? You know, I'm not sure I can comment tonight because we have a historian on the panel. I lived here most of my life, but so mine is memory and a little research I did. I know a little bit of Hungarian history. I think the right wing was always there. As György herself says, sometimes fading away, sometimes in power. I think probably the current economic situation in the world was one of the factors, but I'm not a historian, I'm not a politician, but it is there today. Erika? Does she continue teaching, and do her students pass on the message? She lost her, well, no, at the end of the film, she became the head of the Cultural Affairs Department of Kalocsa, which is a very prestigious and wonderful job, and she was more than qualified. And she did a terrific job, and then the regime changed, or the country turned more to the right. She lost that job. She became a vice principal of another school, but she's not teaching. So I think the former students do. Actually, I ran into a former student of hers here when I was in Washington last time, and she was just aglow that György is getting the recognition. So, and now she's invited to various festivals, and her book is out. So her message is getting out. Yes?
Is it true that the current Jewish community in Hungary is the biggest in Europe?
Yes, it is. I know it from the same statistics as you do. If the Jewish community as big, the largest Jewish community in Europe, it is. I don't know. I think there's hardly any Jews in the countryside. They're all in Budapest. And I really don't know the reason for that, because the survival rate was the survival rate for the Jewish community of Hungary is about the same as Kalocsa, about 2/3 perished.
I visited the synagogue in Budapest. It is beautiful.
Yes, they restored that.
Do you know how the Holocaust is treated generally in Hungary now in schools, elementary, high school?
I don't think it's in the curriculum, and we are one of the mission. Do they teach the Holocaust in the curriculum in Hungary, in high school and elementary schools? I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's not in the official curriculum. Some schools do it, and one of my missions, and György's, and anybody who wants to help, to try to distribute this film to every school in Budapest, which may or may not be very easy. You cannot just go bypassing the authorities. I'm not sure whether it would ban it or I really don't know. But the short answer is that it is not in the official curriculum.
After tonight at the DC Jewish Community Center, where will your film be shown? Is it in other festivals? I understand that it's not yet in distribution.
That is a loaded question. The question was that after tonight screening at the Jewish Community Center, where the film would be shown. We do not have a distribution. I came here because of these wonderful people invited me and sent me a ticket. And the film was in Australia just a couple of weeks ago. They didn't send me a ticket. I didn't go. But I'm getting fan mails from Sydney and Melbourne. I don't know. It was playing in Israel. Has been around, not really big major festivals. And the answer, I don't know. The other thing we're trying to set up to sell at least DVDs, and that's another issue. But as we go ahead and trying to put the film out, we are still facing some financial issues as well. So I hope that, particularly in view of what's happening in the world today and that incident in Hungary, suddenly it's a very timely film, and my goal is to bring it to broader audiences, not just Jewish audiences, not just Hungarian audiences, but everywhere. Yes.
Is Yuki's book translated?
Say it again?
Is her book translated?
No, it's not. But hearing the word translation, is the book translated, and it's not translated yet, but it triggered something that the translator and the interpreter of the film is sitting right here. Ami Modley. Ami, stand up. Yes.
Nobody says anything, and I have read some things that the United States government, as the British, it seemed to have Jews to immigrate to the West. And if they would have really done more, then less people have died. And I saw a film, it's still in Hungary, it was called Isten után az első. After God, the first on a ship is a captain. And this is a true story that the Jewish children saved, and the American government didn't want to let them land. So the captain decided to sink the ship, which he did, because the captain is the first after God on the ship, and the children were saved. This was in the late 30s.
That was more a statement than a question, that the British and the United States government did not help Jews to escape, and therefore probably more people perished than it should have. And a concrete example from, was that film? A true story that there was a ship with Jewish children, and they sank the ship and everybody perished. They saved. Okay, my. I see. Okay, it got lost in a translation. I don't know anything about this. Anybody here? But yeah, you know the story.
I heard of the story.
Okay. My next film. Yes. The list which I quoted, the Jaros list. Jaros was the interior minister of Hungary, and I actually have it. It's from where did I get it? Well, Gyöngyi got it from the county library in Bács-Kiskun megye, in the county library in Hungary. So if you, it may even be on the internet, the Jaros, Jaross list. But we happen to have a librarian here.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind, and I don't know, is to go to the Yad Vashem. They have lots of lists. They're very helpful. There's a lot online. You can search by town, by name. It helps you with variations of the titles of the names. So and they also have a place you can send questions to, or the U.S. Holocaust Museum. I'm sure especially after the film came out, if they didn't have a copy of the list, which I'm sure they might, contact the Holocaust Museum. Lenore Bell is the head librarian. You can shoot off an email right to Lenore at the Holocaust Museum or phone there, and I'm sure she'll help you network out to where the list is if it's not in Yad Vashem or the Holocaust Museum itself. So that's where I would go.
I'm not sure if there is a comprehensive list for a whole country. What I have is the Kalocsa list of well over 600 names. And I think it was a regional thing, but I'm sure the library could.
If you don't have it, if no one else has it, we want a copy of it for the library.
Sure, it's all yellow and it's very patinaed.
Okay,
And,
let's go to the list.
No, I'll give it to you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I was wondering, you mentioned that the Archbishop was sort of guarded about supporting the memorial. Was there much in the way of resistance from other people, or was it generally pretty enthusiastic reception?
He said it because the Archbishop was somewhat.
Repeat the question.
I am.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting it. Give me another hour and I will admit. He commented that since the Archbishop was somewhat guarded and he wants to know if other people were sort of resistant or not hostile. Well, yes, a little, but those are the ones who didn't come to the memorial. And through, I was shooting there 2 years in a row for several weeks each time. And one of my motto was from Gyöngyi, said, okay, I knew some of the inhabitants. Some of them even remembered me as a child, which was quite amazing. And they came forward and they brought me gifts and said, introduce me to someone who was out there and applauding and cheering. He said, there are many, but they won't talk to you. So, but the bishop was quite interesting, was very, very guarded, and certainly that, gee, what a great idea, what can I do to help? No.
Did the Archbishop attend the memorial, or
Yes.
did anybody else from the church?
Did the Archbishop attend the memorial? Yes. There was a very touching piece in a cemetery when he said a blessing and the chief rabbi spoke too. So
The chief rabbi of where? Of what? There's no rabbi there, so what chief?
they came down from Budapest. Yes.
Our students in this country knowing about it, because that can be forgotten as well, especially in a time when it's rather, the United States is rather insular in some ways. Is there a possibility of library systems, such as the Library of Congress or the Los Angeles Public Library System, distributing the DVD to history classes?
Is there a possibility for libraries distributing the film to classes? I don't know about libraries. Libraries are generally not in distribution business.
We don't distribute it all, and we guard, because of copyright issues, we keep very close tabs and don't circulate our DVDs.
But they are distributors who do nothing but that, and that's what I'm pursuing now. Yes?
Along those same lines, are you familiar with the documentary called Paper Clips?
Yes.
Which is the story of how a school in Tennessee that knew nothing about the Holocaust, their teachers and their education department in that school did this as a unit. That's distributed everywhere. The Holocaust has that one. I know that.
Yeah, and you can buy that one commercially too. It's available.
Well, I hope sooner or later this will be available too. And if it all fails, I set up a little thing and start licking stamps and sending them out to people who have requests. Yes?
I don't have a question per se, more of a comment to the gentleman that asked about the viewpoint of Jobbik or far right in Hungary. I'm not an expert historian, but I've studied the region for several years, as well as the language. I was overseas for graduate school recently. The first year I spent in the UK, and the second year was in Hungary. During my year of study in the UK.
Can you speak up a little? You want to come up to the microphone? Just speak up.
Come up here.
Again, as I was saying, I spent my graduate study overseas, the first year in the UK, the second year in Hungary, and I also studied regional and Hungarian history and language. During my first year of graduate study in the UK, I kept a close watch on what was happening in Hungary, for I was looking forward to spending my second year of study in Budapest. During my year of study in the UK, the percentage of the far-right party in parliament had between 15 and 20% of the vote, and when I moved to Hungary for the second year of study, the far-right party had at or just over 20% of the vote. Again, I'm not an expert on Jobbik. Charles Gotti will be at the film this evening on the panel. But just with my experience, living in Europe, living in Hungary, that's what I saw, what I read. Also, you mentioned March 15th as the national holiday. A classmate and I were out taking in the festivities of the day, and there was a Jobbik sort of rally sort of set up at one of the city's main metro stations, and there was quite a large crowd. And from what I was able to understand from the speeches, they were not saying, understandably, they weren't saying very nice things about the Jewish community, and they did not have a very nice message to Shimon Peres either. Thank you.
The sequel, unfortunately.
Okay, I've got a comment. I know a question. Are there any Hungarian Jews going back to claim properties? Any survivors like they do in Germany? Did anybody go to your town to try to claim? And what were the results if they were allowed? Is there a mechanism for that?
That has any Hungarian Jews going back to claim properties in Hungary. That has happened already under the previous regime. This is 70 years later. So there's some where taken care of, not very gallantly, but that's I think is closed.
Any in your town? Oh, they can't go back?
No, you can go back, but they're not giving you anything. The weird thing in my family home, which was a substantial building, they kicked us out, of course, became the ghetto. We returned after the war. We went back to the home, and then the communists came and kicked us out and nationalized the house. And by that time, I was living here. My family died out, so it was a nationalized house. Then suddenly, the regime kind of changed again, and they sold it. So isn't that selling stolen property? So that's, yeah, but there's no new anything. That they closed that door, I think. Yes.
I can address some of that in that in the early 90s, the Hungarian government had a compensation coupon program for Jews who lost property or even if they were in forced labor to get some kind of monetary compensation. But the coupon compensation program, so-called, was really more of a token program, unlike Prague, for example, in Czech Republic, where they actually got back the actual property. In Hungary, they got coupons with which you could basically, what my mother, who was also from Kalocsa, got, I was able to buy a refrigerator. And they had the general store on Main Street, a huge property that where her family, the general store was out, on the front, and then the family dwelling was in the back. And through nationalization and communism, there were 8 families living in there, so it was a substantial piece of real estate and a family business. And so for all of that, after my mother, on principle, reapplied, went back to Hungary to deal with all of this. That's another story. But the number of coupons, or the value of the coupons, I was in the early 90s able to buy a refrigerator. So that's the kind of compensatory program there was, but that's over.
Shall I repeat it? Basically, actually, I knew Ami's family in Kalocsa, and she described the variety store, how do you call that? General store, and the family lived behind the store. And it was also nationalized. And in the 90s, the transitional government, or whatever government that was, they give out compensation coupons. And Ami collected coupons, and for all that property, she got enough to buy a new refrigerator. And I got some coupons too. I don't even think that it was enough for a refrigerator. No, I sold them. Somebody wanted to buy it as an investment. That's what happened.
One last question.
You said that they didn't know that there were Jews in this town. Is there any Jewish cemetery? Sort of like it's being kept, do you know?
Yes, there is a scene in the film when whether there was a Jewish cemetery there and how come people didn't know there were Jews living there. Some of them didn't know, some of them did not want to know. The Jewish cemetery was, when I first went there in 2008 and started talking and filming Gyöngyi, we went to the cemetery, which was a jungle, literally. There's not too many jungles in the plains of Hungary, but this was one. I had to discover old family tombstones, large black marbles, totally hidden by weeds and trees. And so most people didn't even know it was there. And again, one of Gyöngyi's incredible achievements that she cleaned up that cemetery. And by the time this memorial happened, it was spick and span. What's happening today, I don't know, because weeds grow. And that's there's students saying that a few words, and there's more in the film, that when we inquired from our parents, they didn't know. Parents probably didn't, grandparents might have. But Gyöngyi herself said, she grew up there, she said, I didn't even see a Jew until just a few years ago.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabor. It was a
Thank you.
wonderful
Thank you.
talk. And if you'd like to see the film, it's been screening. It'll be screened at the DCJCC on 16th and Q tonight at 7 o'clock, and it's free of charge, but you might want to make reservations just so you won't be surprised when you get there. But thank you very, very much, and we'll have more events coming, so stay tuned. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.